We have Patricia Noelle with us today, who is a leading spiritual psychologist that helps people see the gifts and experience the limitless potential and possibilities that exist right now for your lives. And she is also an author and a psychedelic guide, has done amazing things in this world, has given back to children in Africa, and wears so many hats, all in the name of making people better and inspiring the world. Patricia, welcome.
Thank you so much. Such a gift and honor to be here. And thank you for that gracious introduction. One thing that has always inspired me that my kind of slogan is it does not matter what circumstances you've lived through, healing is possible and having the life of your dreams is also possible. And, I think I'm a living testament to that. So thank you for such an appropriate introduction.
Absolutely. It's absolutely warranted. And what you said right there, let's roll with that. What led you to be able to say what you just did right there, and brought you to that discovery for
Hmm.
your life?
Yeah, so I have a really complicated trauma history from incest to teen pregnancy, religious abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse. In 2017, I lost a sister to fentanyl overdose. In 2023, I lost a sister to suicide. And I've had so many obstacles along the way that could have prevented me from wanting to go on. And, it's interesting. Before my sister died, she just said, I don't understand. You keep saying, like, what does it mean to do the work? And to me, doing the work is that the only way out is through. And part of that process for me is to actually look back and reflect on parts of our childhood, heal through those. And then I think the greatest gift that we can give in the world is to be of service in the world.
Hmm. Amen to that.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry for what you've experienced there with your family, and that just caught my heart there as you were saying that. We mentioned some cool things about you and the work that you're doing now. But what do you believe is most important for the world to know about Patricia Noel?
Well, I always tell everyone that my heart is in Africa. In 2017, I went through three tragic and sudden deaths of a dear friend, my sister and sister-in-law. And I called a dear friend of mine and I said, I know the only way through this is to be of service. And she said, pack your bags and go to Africa. And through my efforts there, I thought I was going to go be of service to them. And really, what ended up happening is this community and village held me in my grief and taught me how to process that in community. So, my
Hmm.
heart and soul is in Africa. We now have 150 orphans that we support there in Tororo, Uganda. But aside from that, really to support others. And the way that I kind of look at it is I'm not your healer, but I'm holding your hand through your healing so you're not alone.
Hmm.
And I think that's so important as people go back and experience some of their childhood trauma to not
Hmm.
feel alone and to be completely supported.
Hmm. I love what you said about how you went to Africa to serve,
Mm.
and then you ended up really feeling served yourself by this amazing community. And I believe that's so important because we can learn something from anybody in this life. I've been a big brother for several years now through Big Brothers Big Sisters of America,
Mhm. Mhm.
and I love to be able to give back to the younger version of and be there for a youth that is also coming up through a broken household. And while I first entered that thinking, okay, I'm going to be here to make sure that whoever I get matched up with understands that what they're going through is actually going to be something that serves them. And I'm going to teach him all of these different things. And what I've found through that experience now, being a big brother for about 8 years,
Mhm.
is I learned just as much from them, if not more, than
Right?
than I'm possibly
Mhm.
giving to them.
Yeah.
We hold common ground in that trauma has shaped us, and we also hold common ground with many listeners that many people in this world, if not everybody, has been impacted by at least one or multiple significant events, whether
Mhm.
that be abuse, family issues, losing someone suddenly. We've all likely faced a wide gamut of experiences. And as we were talking before, a lot of people will go through this life and hold on to trauma negatively and not convert pain into triumph.
Mhm.
You've helped countless individuals break free from limiting beliefs that have been a result of early childhood trauma. What do you believe is the the way that people can really begin to recognize what's truly holding them back and start dismantling that so that they can start to experience the possibilities that they do have for their life and begin to live their life that they ultimately deserve?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I lived a life of perfectionism and being stoic for a lot of years. And I didn't really have a lot of conscious awareness of my childhood trauma until I was in my 30s and had a myriad of events that kind of catapulted me into a healing crisis, as you might say. And I really believe that the first step to healing is to have awareness. What
Mhm,
actually happened? How can we go back and have compassion for ourselves and also realize that those involved with whatever happened in our lives were they were doing the best that they could with the tools and resources that they have.
mhm,
And so I think always when I look at this is the first step is to have that conscious awareness. And I recognize that a lot of people have a lot of fear into going into the past.
mhm.
Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, it's do you feel that there's a lot of people that you've worked with and that are fearful of even diving back into the past because of what they may discover?
Absolutely. I work with a lot of influential, highly successful individuals that realize they're getting to a point in their life or their career, or their marriages, or their relationships with their kids. And all of a sudden, there's a threshold that they can't break through, right?
Mm,
And so, one of the tools and powerful modalities that I work with are psychedelics. It was, my path that really catapulted my healing. And one of the things that happened when I started working with psychedelics is I was able to go back to some of these childhood earlier experiences and really understand how those behavior patterns had played out throughout the course of my life and really course correct. Because I think oftentimes, if we don't understand why we're driven by, I mean, for you, exercise or, porn, addiction, alcoholism. I lost two sisters to, addiction. And if we don't really understand why and what it is that we're numbing, it's so hard for us to fully and radically heal. And so psychedelics have
mm,
been a powerful tool in allowing someone to actually go back and visit some of these earlier childhood experiences in a safe container. And I think another fear that people have is they're afraid, if I go look at it, am I going to be stuck there? Will I be stuck
mm,
in the sadness or depression? Will I be stuck in that feeling of when I lost a parent, I wasn't able to process that grief. And so I think it's another, element that holds people back from actually going back and looking at their past.
Hmm. I know that spiritual psychology and psychedelics are a large portion of your work, and you mentioned the psychedelics being key in your healing. So, given how malleable our minds are, and the way I look at the mind is that it's basically a piece of software that is
Mm,
running. And just like a computer, we can download programs that will help us achieve outcomes faster or eliminate certain steps or eliminate certain thought patterns. And just like a computer as well, we also have there's viruses that can impact us, or we'll call it the limiting beliefs, or we've had bad programs that are just sitting here, but we have the power to resolve them and eradicate them rather. Is ayahuasca and the various psychedelics, do they help achieve those outcomes much faster, or what's the differentiating factor or factors of the psychedelic techniques versus your normal understand why you believe in what you believe in and work through traditional modalities and therapy?
Yeah, so I love that you're using this analogy because it's one I often use. So, for me, I had spent years in talk therapy and never really got to the root of kind of some of the behaviors or patterns that I was acting out.
Mm,
And so, like you said, what happens, we have these traumatic experiences in childhood, and it's almost like these files get opened. And imagine that you open your computer and you realize you've got several files running in the background.
mhm,
You have all these tabs that are open and your computer is kind of bogged down and slow. So psychedelics are kind of like opening all those tabs on the computer, and one by one we start to close them. And oftentimes when you go through a psychedelic experience, it can be 20, 30, 40 years that you're processing of trauma. And it's kind of like, also taking a snow globe and shaking a snow globe up. And all of a sudden, that freshly fallen snow, the brain has the ability to rewire these new these new patterns in the brain. And so oftentimes someone, there's been a lot with, you know, eating disorders and ketamine. It's not so much that they have to go back and process all of their childhood trauma. Sometimes it's a matter of giving the brain a new neural pathway. And all of a sudden, those triggers or addictive behaviors kind of subside, and our operating system, or also known as our brain, starts operating more effectively.
mhm.
I'm curious, may I ask you a few questions about your childhood?
Please, yeah.
So, what about, or when did you know that you had healing that you needed to do from your childhood?
When I discovered, or when I was able to really put a name around, rather, in my early 20s, when I understood that I had a fear of abandonment and wanted to stay away from relationships because of some things that I saw with my parents growing up, and really developing a anxious attachment style.
Mm,
So early early 20s is when I come to recognize that I have this fear of abandonment that does not want me to commit to any woman because I don't want to encounter the same thing that I saw growing up, because I programmed that, all right, relationship equals bad things happen, equals you get left, you get cheated on, and I'm not doing that.
mm. So this is such I love this. Thank you so much because I think it's such an important example. So, one of the things that happens when doing psychedelic experiences is you would be able to go back to those inciting incidences that happened with your mom and dad, be able to see how that played out. And then what you did, I love the work of, I studied under Gabor Mate, and he says, trauma isn't what happens to you, it's what you make it mean about you
Mm.
from what happened to you, right? So you created this narrative that, probably love isn't safe. Someone will
Mhm.
leave me, whatever your narrative is. And so psychedelics can go back to the root and help you rewire that without spending the years and years in therapy that we often do trying to understand ourselves better. And I think also too, for addiction, even, you spoke that you came from a household where there was a lot of drinking involved, right?
Mhm.
And to help those, rewiring those neural pathways. And I've just watched so many people over the course of supporting others on their healing journeys to be able to come overcome addictive tendencies as well.
So if I took what you said, and if I provide a more specific example, because this is
Mhm.
one that I do share frequently, whether it's on the podcast or in keynote speeches, about the night that I discovered that this gift was given to me of, going to the gift now that I use now to inspire people and teach people about developing discipline and systems so that, they don't go down the road that maybe they were exposed to. But it's also the same night that, if I were to trace everything back to my hesitancies and beliefs that I just explained there, would, and I'll explain the night. I'm 6 years old. It's a what is going to be a normal night of my father coming home late from the restaurant, intoxicated. My mom is feeling off that day. I know that something's up, because one thing I'm grateful for with this experience is it helped develop a very strong intuition
Mhm.
that I could tell just by how loud the music was in my dad's car and how fast he was driving home, like what type of night
Mhm.
we were going to have. And this particular night, he comes home. I've got my ear up against the the door, just waiting. And sure enough, hear a loud boom in my parents' room. I run in there. There's a hole in the wall. My my dad's fist had just gone through it, angry. I look over to the bathroom. My mom is crying and yelling in the bathroom that she had just found out that my dad was cheating on her.
Mhm.
And the rest of that night, over the course of a few hours, continued to escalate. The police show up at our home, and I'm answering the door, 6 years old, shaking like a leaf.
Mhm.
And they're wondering what's going on here. And I remember responding, my mom's upset about some woman, but I don't really know what's going on. But that same night, Patricia, I also made a promise to myself that I'm never going to carry this on, and I'm never going to put my future family through this. And the buck stops with me. Now, those preceding years, there were still similar nights like that, but it's that one particular night. I mean, if we wanted to, I could paint every little picture of it. But I still find myself at times where I do have that inkling thought of, well, what if this person leaves me?
Mhm.
Or what if this person is not faithful to me? Would psychedelics be able to bring me back to that exact moment and help take those programs out that I just mentioned, or those little inklings that come up from time to time, and just completely rid them away?
Oh, there's so many, I have so many things to say. I mean, first, thank you so much for sharing that. And, I think something that's really unique about your experience that I just want to highlight is that in that moment, where you were simultaneously getting programmed of I'm going this internal fear, which I would imagine a part of your athleticism and things like that, you move trauma out of your body through movement.
Hmm.
And so when you say that you went and you were standing at the door shaking like a leaf, we store that trauma in our DNA. And there was something that also struck me about what you said is from that inciting incident, you knew that you were going to take this and have this experience that you were having and have it be for good. I felt the same way as a child, and oftentimes people are like, why are you writing a book and why are you doing a film? It's like, because I know I didn't live through all of this for nothing. I mean, sitting behind the
Mm.
white picket fence. So I want to get to your question about, so can psychedelics go and just remove there's a lot of different psychedelics out there. One substance that I do enjoy using is MDMA. It's not a psychedelic, but it allows you to have such deep compassion for yourself and whomever was there in that environment. So perhaps you could see your father, his own childhood trauma, where here he doesn't know how to regulate his own emotions. And so it comes out, I had very physically abusive parents as well. And I think that part of you that has run that program in your mind that women aren't safe or relationships aren't safe or will I be cheated on, it can anchor you to this place inside of you that allows you to know so intimately your own lovability
Mm.
that it doesn't matter what the outside world does. It doesn't matter if someone cheats on you or leaves you or any of that. Your own internal lovability is so refined and honed in that the rest of it doesn't really matter because you know innately you'll be okay.
Mm. Mm.
So I'm
Now,
curious, like in those times when that shows up for you, what happens internally inside of you? Is it an anxiety response? Do you have a somatic experience of it? Is it just the monkey mind that takes over?
knowing what I know now and really focusing on inner work and
Mhm.
being in the work, I have conditioned myself to recognize it for one, and two, okay, what am I really feeling here? And I often then will question, like, one thing I've programmed myself to question if I have a feeling of, oh, Patricia's cheating on me.
Mhm.
What makes that true? What
Yeah.
evidence do I have right now in this moment that that is true? Or am I just making up a story? Because I believe it's so easy to create these false narratives in our minds and then we run with it as true. And
Mhm.
then let's say you come home, you're just at the grocery store, and I would have put myself through this entire anxiety attack for what?
Mhm.
And I did in my before I learned about the work and inner
Mhm.
work, I would that was a man, this is me being as probably as vulnerable as I've been lately on the show. That was what would happen. I would make up stories and then run with them as true and justify them because sure as hell the thoughts that I had when my dad was off doing his thing or wasn't coming home on time ended up being true. But does that mean it's the outcome for everybody else or every thought?
Yeah.
No. So when it does come and visit me periodically now, or if I have a limiting thought about something else in life, I ponder what evidence do I have that supports this?
Yeah.
And it really helps me snap out of it.
Yeah. I listened to your podcast this morning about negative thinking, and
Hmm.
you talked a lot about that. I don't know if Byron Katie was a resource for you about doing the work and understanding if our thoughts are true. Is she
Y-
someone that you've read?
You know what's interesting is I literally just got that book from Byron Katie because fast forward to the last question I'm going to ask you
Mm,
is one book besides yours, but we'll remember
mm,
that here and again in a minute.
yeah.
But I had a friend of mine, Chris Doris, on the podcast. Chris
Mm,
is he's branded himself as the mental toughness coach. He works with a lot of athletes,
mhm,
primarily golfers, PGA Tour golfers, with golf being such a mental game that it is. And we talked a lot about the work. I just had him on recently, and he mentioned Byron Katie's book Way of
yeah,
Being as his top read for 2025. So
yeah.
it's it's sitting there. But yeah, it's so I have become quite fascinated with, we are human beings, but really we're just beings.
Mhm,
And I have been looking at, or rather studying and exploring, who am I being right now? Not, okay, like, who am I being? Like, I'm not being a podcaster, sure, but who am I being right now? Is in, what am I putting out into the world? I'd say right now, I believe right now I'm being inspiring and
mhm,
insightful for others. And the more that we make ourselves a science experiment, I believe the more free that we can become.
mm.
What would you add to that? Or is my logic flawed, or is it in line with, you know, the work?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a matter of surrender. When I
Mm,
can get out of my own way
yeah.
and tune in, one of the things that you touched on that's so important is that children of childhood abuse, they learn to be highly intuitive and almost clairvoyant. Like, I bet that you can walk into a room and assess a room like that, and you know kind of what the energy of the room is, right?
Mhm.
And so for me, I feel like if I can get out of my own way and surrender and be in flow with the universe, it'll send me and guide me exactly where I'm meant to be in the timeline that I'm meant to be on. And I think so long as we can do the work of always, having that level of self inquiry and connecting with the inner counselor inside of us. I mean, yeah, of course, you can be, your own human experience in this thing called life. And I think a misnomer that actually comes up a lot is that healing has to be hard. And
Mm,
I think one thing that I've witnessed through your podcasts and your teaching is that through simple models and methods, it can actually be really rewarding and quite fun. Yeah.
absolutely. And on that note, that's where I was going as you were responding there. I was thinking, what frameworks do you have, or if you ever encounter yourself having a negative thought or a trauma response, have you developed your own framework or list of steps understand and then understand and then redirect so that you can get back to center and ultimately being in alignment with whatever it is that you desire life to be?
Yeah. Absolutely. So I think I take an individualized approach, but I think there's one thing specifically that is an absolute game changer. Let's go back because you've already highlighted it. Then I don't have to tell another story of a traumatic experience. Someone cheats on you, your girlfriend cheats on you. You go to that initial place of reaffirming the child that thought that he would be left or abandoned or whatever it is.
Hmm.
In my opinion, all of our traumatic responses or all anything that has a big trigger. So when you have a life experience and it is like this visceral, take your breath away or make your heart start pounding. If you can sit and tap into whatever is happening in your body or the monkey mind that's going crazy, and you can rewind that tape to your earliest childhood experience of feeling that way, and you can go and comfort that younger part of you. Perhaps it was a 6-year-old shaking like a leaf at the door with the police officer there, and you hold him in your arms and you comfort him and let him know, you're safe. I've got you. We're okay. I'm at the helm now. I'm okay. And that's what I was saying about doing psychedelics, is that part of us that innately knows we're lovable, even if someone were to leave us, we know we would be okay. So,
Mm.
I think one of the most important things is going back, really sitting with the body when we have those triggers, and, don't waste a good trigger, because they are your path to healing and freedom.
Mm. Is it possible for somebody to have multiple events, or does it always go back to, is there one, call it, cornerstone event that all of this really comes back to? I think about that night. It wasn't the only one, but it was definitely a cornerstone night,
Mm.
an
Yeah.
experience early on. And it was interesting, given that you have done work with Gabor Mate. I was doing some homework on him as well,
Mm.
and they found there was a study that with PTSD in soldiers, if 100 soldiers went to war, then 80 of them would come back with 80 of them would come back with PTSD
Mm-hmm.
because of events that traced all the way back to their childhood. It
Yeah.
wasn't necessarily what they saw during wartime.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that wasn't significant, because I can only imagine. And same thing with folks that were in the Nazi camps.
Mm-hmm.
It goes all the way back. So is it typically always the one, or is it multiple that people need to go back and really understand and sit with?
It's such a good question. So, I often use the analogy. You and your mom are walking down the street. You're 6 years old. You're in Arizona. It's 115 degrees out in the summer heat. And you walk by an ice cream parlor and you're like, Mommy, Mommy, let's go in. So you go into the ice cream parlor and you come back out, and you and your mom both have an ice cream, and you're strolling down the sidewalk in the summer heat, and all of a sudden ice cream starts dripping all over your hands, and your mom grabs it and she licks around the ice cream really quick. You go into hysterics, and from that inciting incident, it's like, I never get what I want, I'm not enough, I'm incapable of doing it on my own, right? So, do I think that there's one big inciting incident that can happen that really changes someone's life forever? Absolutely. But also those little T traumas, the little nuanced ones, I often find when people get into psychedelic experiences, so many times it's the little T traumas that they didn't even know informed their behavior for the rest of their life.
Mm,
And so, in my opinion, I think it can be both, because it's all in, how is it that I have lost two sisters, to addiction, suicide, etc. And yet, for me, I wanted to go on to inspire others to actually do their healing work. It's how those experiences of earlier childhood impacted them. Like for me, I always, much like yourself, at 6 years old, it was like, no, I'm going to be the one that stops this. I'm going to be the
mm,
one who talks about it. Yesterday I had a friend say to me, why do you want to keep talking about it? Why do you want to write a book? Like, do you want to be a victim forever? And it was kind of interesting, because I sat back and said, what about people's truths makes you feel uncomfortable? Because I'm doing it so people know that no matter what, you can heal anything that's happened to you in your life.
mm. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
In your journey, Patricia, and especially with your tracing back your experiences through psychedelics and going back, What did you tell younger Patricia that experienced the traumatic things that you did and mentioned at the very beginning between your teenage pregnancy or abusive parents, incest, experiencing those things? What did you have to say to her?
Oh, I love the question. Well, I believe we all are born into this world so perfect. And I firmly believe that we all have our own unique blueprint of what we're meant to do in the world, no matter what. And so for me, it's just going back and having the conversation with her of, you're perfect. This wasn't about you. This is what got acted out, out of their own unhealed trauma and
Mm,
wounds. But to reassure her that there's nothing wrong with her by what she's had to live through and experience through the abusive people in her life. And it also doesn't have to define you. I mean,
mm,
you're walking living proof right now of you've lived through such instability where a child deserves to have instability that I would imagine for a lot of years you struggled with some form of anxiety because you are trying to constantly regulate your internal nervous system because it never got regulated with your parents,
mhm,
right? And so now you've found these coping strategies to help you along the way. And one of the things that you do so brilliantly with your clients is to create structure and order and discipline, which also helps nervous system regulation. There's dependability, there's consistency, there's desired outcomes. And, I mean, such an incredible path for someone to follow to achieve results, right?
mhm.
Yeah.
Do you believe it's tough for some people to hear? Because as you mentioned, even with the some of the people that were involved in your traumas,
Hmm.
and as mentioned, even with my dad, and I absolutely loved him to death. We've got an amazing relationship now, but I also recognize and I agree with you that as unfortunate as the circumstances were, he was doing the best he could with the tools he had.
Hmm.
And when I first heard someone tell me that, I thought that's bullshit. You're now
Yeah.
what are we justifying? Are we
Yeah.
justifying what these people did? And
Hmm.
that's not what that means.
Yeah.
But what's some advice that or insight that you can provide around that a lot of what people do is it's driven by something, but hurt people
Yeah.
and are often doing the best they can with the tools that they were given to them because that's kind of tough to hear sometimes.
Hmm. I'm in a deep process of this right now. And when my sister Jacqueline passed away in 2023, I thought I had kind of done all my work around this. And then you lose a loved one, and you're like, wait a second. It kind of took me back to my childhood again of,
Mm,
I think it also intersects forgiveness, for me when you bring that up, because it's not to let them off the hook. It's a matter of having compassion for ourselves and others. And I think there's a really key ingredient to this, and that's boundaries. Because it's not that, oh, hurt people. And so I'm going to continue to have you in my life to keep injuring me, right? It's a matter of me to recognize this is a part of your wounding. And
mm,
now I have to take moral inventory of what is nurturing in my life and what boundaries feel safe for me to not feel like I'm being injured by this recurring person who hasn't done their work potentially. And then I think it's a matter of going to that place of having forgiveness for ourselves first and foremost,
yep.
of the ways that we abandoned ourselves in our adult lives.
Mm, yeah. I I'm with you, completely
Mhm.
with you.
Yeah.
Patricia, people may have their curiosity piqued, especially because psychedelics aren't something that come up often on this podcast. But I'm so grateful that we get to share the we get you get to share insights with us as to the transformative benefits that they possess.
Yeah.
And curiosity may be piqued in terms of, well, how can I create an experience like this or test this out? I know you have retreats,
Mhm.
but what are some ways that people can explore this healing method? And is this something that you also see becoming more available to Americans, or is that something that you wish
Mhm.
becomes more available and we're seeing some advances there in the medical field? What does that look like?
Yeah, so there's a website, maps.org, maps.org, which is a phenomenal resource for all things kind of psychedelics and the clinical trials and research that's being done there. So it's a well of wellspring of knowledge there. Also on my website, I have some information, Patricia Noelle, Noelle.com, about some of my retreats and such. And then to answer your question, look, there's a lot of movement in this psychedelic renaissance. And luckily, speaking about psychedelics is becoming mainstream. And in a lot of states, we've seen decriminalization. We're working on legalization. Um, and I think that it's the way of mental health moving forward. I mean, it is such a powerful tool when used in a safe set and setting.
What is it that you hope rings true someday as it relates to psychedelics? Is it that it's as simple as getting it from your local doctor, or what do you ultimately envision with this so that more people can experience their healing power and really achieve these outcomes of rewiring our trauma
Mhm.
in a manner that probably wouldn't have been available to them without these advances?
Yeah, such a good question. You know, it's it's a tricky landscape out there right now because
Mm,
I think that it will get in the hands of doctors first. And I don't think all doctors are equipped to really hold space for people in the way that I've witnessed, when we're down in the jungle in Costa Rica and doing psychedelics. Indigenous cultures have been using these medicines for years. And there's a lot of the gatekeepers that have been doing these rituals and ceremonies and studied um, for centuries. And I think it would do these medicines a disservice if they only land in the hands of doctors, because I think that it takes a certain skill set to sit with someone in their pain, to sit with someone in their deep healing as they go through this work. And I would say, even for myself, because of my childhood and everything that I've lived through, it gives me a deep compassion and empathy to sit with others through their healing journeys beyond, let's say, a clinical setting. Now, all that to say, I think that there's also, you know, these are healing medicines, and the more that we can make them readily available to the general public, I think is also important. People are starved more than ever. I was talking with someone just before you about, I don't think that we've healed through the collective trauma of COVID. I don't think we've completely
mm,
come through that PTSD that everyone lived through. I look
mm,
at the political landscape. There's a lot of collective trauma going on right now, whatever side
mhm.
you're on. There's a
Right.
lot of diversity. And so my hope would be that it can be readily accessible to whoever that needs it.
And what are some of the outstanding myths that encompass psychedelics that people you wish to see ridden as it as we advance, then there's probably some people that may have this image that psychedelics are just for hippies and their dance parties, and obviously that's not the case. So what are the
Yeah.
narratives that you'd like to see people either go away or that people ultimately understand about why this is a good thing?
I think there's a notion that if you do psychedelics, that it will change who you are at your
Mm,
core. Like I've had a lot of people come to my retreats that have been involved in organized religions, and they, sit before me and say, I really don't want to lose my relationship with Catholicism or Mormonism or whatever it is. That's so innately important to me. And I think one of the things that, I just want to highlight is that if that organization or that thing is truly important to you, going and doing psychedelics is not going to change that part of your personality. You might evaluate your values, and I think too, a lot of people say, well, I'm so afraid if I go do it, I'm going to end up getting a divorce. Well, if deep down inside of you, you knew that your relationship wasn't really you know, appropriate for you or that it was fulfilling, then yeah, that could be a possibility coming out of it because you will see the truth of who you are, and living out of
mm,
integrity of that truth can be really challenging. So I think
mm,
that's one thing. I think the other thing is people often say, I'm afraid of having a bad trip, or I've watched people have bad trips. And it's like you have to look at what was involved in it. Were they at a rave, mixing a bunch of substances, drinking alcohol, staying up late at night on pharmaceuticals? I think the most important part of this is it's all about set and setting. I can guarantee that if you walk this path of doing psychedelics, you'll have some challenging moments.
mm,
Undoubtedly, you'll have some challenging moments because doing our work is not easy. Psychedelics are 20% of the experience, and 80% we have free will of what we're going to do with it. Yeah.
mm. You have another thing in work right now that
Mm,
is going to allow a lot more people to experience who you are, your work, your journey,
mm,
your memoir.
yeah.
Talk through what's in work there, and for someone that eventually picks it up, what would you want them to gain from it?
Yeah. It was so clear to me a handful of years ago that telling my story was important. And a lot of my personal experience revolved around being raised Mormon and a lot of the concealed abuse that was happening within the church. But, abuse like that doesn't discriminate,
Mm,
it's across, you know, all organized religions, and a global issue that we don't really raise enough awareness around. And yes, I had some really challenging and traumatic things happen to me. But what I hope that people gain from reading my memoir is that life can be so beautiful and so incredibly magical if we'll allow ourselves to be curious enough about what's out there for us to be the best version of ourselves. And it doesn't mean that everyone needs to be on podcasts or writing books or doing films or whatever it is. That was my path, and that may not be yours. Perhaps someone else is having a beautiful garden, spending time with their family, whatever your soul's calling is, that I know that peace and happiness is waiting for you, and the freedom to live a life of joy if you choose to do the work.
if you choose to do the work,
Yeah.
it's all of what you said there is available to all of us, regardless
Hmm.
of our circumstances. And
Yeah.
that's what I appreciate. One of the many things that I appreciate about you so much, Patricia, curiosity. You mentioned curiosity, and that's something I've been exploring more. And I've also been noticing a more of a trend with people in the personal development world that exploring curiosity is this theme. How do you maintain curiosity at the forefront, meaning that even though you've got a few things that you've focused to master,
Mhm.
I believe that you know curiosity and openness to experience and everything that life brings to us is also something that you keep at the forefront so that you're
Mhm.
constantly open to what life has.
Mhm.
How do you exhibit that, and how can someone maintain curiosity in their lives, and rather what's the importance of exploring curiosity as we're on our journeys?
Mm. So good. I grew up in a religion where you were essentially born that everything you were doing was wrong. You were guilty until proven innocent. And I think that in my healing work, I had to dissemble all of these judgments that I had around life.
Mm,
And I think part of curiosity for me is also allowing all those judgments of how people are, the choices they make in their lives, the way I loved how you use that an example of, your mom will still call you and say, "Hey, it's cold outside." Are you wearing a jacket today? Or whatever it
yep.
is. But it's like, curiosity is all around that of like, oh, I wonder what it's like for her to still baby me. I wonder what that experience for her is. I wonder what the joy that she gets in calling and knowing that she still has that bond with me, that at any age that I am, she she always wants to be that role for you. That is her role. It's, what she came here to do, right? And so I think that regardless, if we can look at it without, for me, it was really that judgment and look at the world. And this is part of what psychedelics do is if anything were possible, what would your world look like today if you could design it without limitations?
Mm,
And oftentimes our limitations are the ones that we created that aren't even true. So,
yeah,
mhm,
yeah, and it allows us to hear the things that maybe we can't hear, we're supposed to hear.
yeah.
For the longest time, using that example with my mom, what I didn't hear until I discovered the work, you know, I'm 32 years old, and my mom to this day, and I know that until one of us goes, she will call and ask if I'm wearing a sweater if it's cold out. She looks at the weather forecast. Did you bring your jacket? What I used to hear is, I don't trust you to be an adult, and you need to get your jacket because you're not going to wear it if I don't tell you to, or remind
Mm,
you. What I hear now through curiosity and staying focused on the inner work and really exploring what do certain things really mean, or what do certain people, when they say something, what's really being said. And what I know now is that, and what I hear is, it's just someone that loves me.
yeah.
It's just someone that loves me, and I believe that's why this work is so important. And going back, and another thing to highlight your work, that psychedelics can help make clear to us, is to be able to hear the things that maybe people
Mhm,
want us to hear, but we just can't because of our programs that currently
mhm,
reside in our minds that go back a long time.
yeah.
So
Well, I
this is
think one of
beautiful.
the things that psychedelics does as well is that it puts the ego on the shelf,
Mm,
right? It's like, why don't you take a back seat?
yeah.
And without that running the show and telling you what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad, what to be fearful of, and that can just kind of rest for a minute. And you
Hmm.
can see things from the perspective of a greater reality for you. It's amazing how your entire world can shift.
Amen.
It's pretty magical.
Patricia, this has been a magical discussion. And before we go into our rapid fire, which is our customary close, how can people keep up with you and all of your amazing work and the things that you're doing not only here stateside but globally with the children in Uganda?
Yeah. Thank you. So Instagram, Patricia underscore Noel underscore, or my website, patricianoel.com. Also for my work in Africa is orphansclub.org. So two ways to stay connected for sure.
Appreciate everything that you're doing. Now,
Yeah.
our customary close is a rapid fire session. It's one gem, one step, one book.
Oh,
And the way
wow.
this works is envision that we're going to a cool restaurant for lunch in Deer Valley or Park City, and we're going up 3 elevator floors. There's going to be a person that walks in on each floor, and they're only going up one floor. They recognize who you are, and they have one question for you. So the amount of time you
Mm.
have to answer the question is the amount of time it takes to go up one elevator floor. All
Ah,
right.
pressure's on. We'll see how it goes.
So someone hops in, they recognize you, they've listened to the podcast, and they ask, Patricia, what's one gem that you have, whether it be a quote or a mantra that you live your life by that I can put in my back pocket and live my life by as well?
Mm. So I love the quote, our life begins to end the day we stop speaking about things that are important. I think
Ooh,
is how it goes by Martin Luther King.
ooh,
Yeah. And so I think it's about speaking about the things that matter.
I love that one.
Yeah.
Next person gets on. Patricia, what's one step that I can take today to kickstart my healing journey?
Mhm. I think the first thing that you can do, I mean, one, you could go to my website and start to, I think one thing is anyone you feel inspired by. When the student is ready, the teacher appears. And it doesn't have to be psychedelics. It doesn't have to be someone that you know. It could be a book that lands in your lap. It could be a podcast that you listen to. When the student is ready, the teacher appears, and listen to the clues along the way.
When the student is ready, the teacher appears. Last one, and maybe the most difficult. What's one book besides yours that we can read in 2025 to improve our mindsets, and start our healing journey, build a better relationship with trauma?
Yeah. The Body Keeps the Score by
Hmm,
Bessel van der Kolk. 100%. I mean, this book is a game changer to understand how we show up and process trauma in our bodies.
beautiful. Patricia, this has been an impactful discussion. I really appreciate how there was a lot of more interactive dialogue, and that here's some real situations and let it play out. I
Mm.
truly appreciate your work and how you help others really, again, experience their limitless potential. Loved the insights and the transformative power of psychedelics, and appreciate you educating us. And when we take everything into play here and understand that we possess all of the tools and the power that we could ever want and need. We possess that right now. We can heal our trauma, build a strong relationship with past pain, and win today. Thanks so
Mm.
much.
I love it. Thank you.